There's a specific kind of person who can look completely fine, while something inside them is quietly running out of strength. You might be the one people call stable, the one who doesn't need much, the one who keeps it together. And maybe that's why no one notices the moment you finally sit down in the most random place, on the edge of your bed, in your parked car, on the bathroom floor for just a second, and it's not even a breakdown. It's more like an internal drop, a soft collapse, like your body is setting something down before you fully realize you've been carrying it. Then someone asks, "How are you so calm about everything?" And you don't know how to explain it's not calmness, it's not peace, it's something your system learned. And the part most people miss is why it shows up so quietly and why it can feel so lonely. We'll get there. People who have been through too much often don't look like they're struggling. They look functional. You probably stay composed in moments where other people fall apart. And later, alone, you finally feel it. Sometimes hours later, sometimes days later, like your emotions are on a delayed schedule. You might read rooms fast, not in a dramatic way, just automatically. You notice a tone shift, a pause that lasts half a second too long, the way someone's energy changes when they say, "I'm fine." You might over-prepare in small ways, backup plans for simple things, not because you love control, because uncertainty used to have consequences. And you might downplay what hurts you. You say, "It's fine," or "It wasn't that bad," or "Other people have it worse." Not to be noble, more like your nervous system doesn't know how to ask for care without feeling guilty. You can hold other people with so much steadiness, but you freeze when it's your turn to need something. You've become so fluent in being strong for others that you forgot how to translate your own pain into words. But that's just the surface, because here's what nobody really says out loud. Sometimes the strength people praise in you is actually a survival posture you never got to take off. And this is the part that really hurts, because it's the part almost nobody sees. When you've been through too much, your strength doesn't feel like a trophy. It can feel like a private job you can't quit. It can look like being the steady one in every crisis, and then realizing you don't have anyone you trust to fall apart with. Carrying a constant low-level tension in your body, like you're bracing for impact, even during normal conversations, even on good days. Feeling strangely distant from your own joy. You can enjoy things, but the joy stays quiet, like your heart learned to celebrate softly so it wouldn't get punished by disappointment. Getting tired in a way sleep doesn't fix, not because you're lazy, because your system has been on for too long. And the strangest part, people don't see any of this because you've learned to look fine. You don't always talk about it because you learned something early. When you explain your pain, people minimize it, or they get uncomfortable, or they ask questions that make you relive it. And underneath it all, there can be a quiet, unnamed grief. Not grief for a person, but grief for a way of being you sense you lost along the way. The version of you that could receive a simple "How are you?" as a simple question, not a strategic one. The part of you that didn't have to translate every silence into meaning. So you carry it alone. You become fluent in being okay. Which leads to the question you might have asked yourself in the dark when everything finally goes quiet. Why do you keep bracing like this? Why can't you just stop? Somewhere along the way, you learned that being unprepared wasn't just uncomfortable, it could be unsafe. This started when your younger self picked up on something most kids never have to think about. The emotional weather in your world could change fast. Maybe you grew up around adults who were unpredictable, warm one day, distant the next. Maybe problems weren't talked through, they were absorbed. And maybe you had to be mature early. Not because you wanted to be, but because someone had to be. And maybe you remember a moment like this. Standing in a doorway, listening to footsteps, watching someone's face before you spoke, trying to figure out what version of them you were getting today. Not because you were dramatic, because you were trying to stay safe. Psychology has a word for this: adaptation. Not a flaw, an adjustment your system made to survive. When stress lasts too long, the brain recalibrates. Your threat detection system can become more sensitive. Your mind gets better at pattern recognition. Your emotions learn to compress, to wait, to stay organized enough to keep you functional. This can overlap with anxiety or trauma responses, but at its core, it's your system trying to protect you. You didn't become this way because you were too much. You became this way because back then it worked. And the child who figured that out, they weren't broken, they were brilliant. Here's what I need you to understand, slowly, clearly. This isn't a flaw, it was a solution. Your brain wasn't broken, it was protecting you. Of course you brace, of course you go quiet. Those were intelligent moves in a place that didn't feel steady. That hyper-awareness wasn't your personality being too intense. It was your nervous system learning to read what wasn't being said, because what wasn't being said used to matter. And here's a way to picture it. Your mind built an internal weather station when you were young, in a climate that was often stormy. It learned to track every pressure drop, every shift in the wind, long before anyone else saw clouds. It wasn't being paranoid, it was being precise. And now, even in milder seasons, that station still runs. It still scans, not because the weather is bad, but because its entire purpose once was to keep you safe. You're not broken. You're someone who learned to forecast emotions in a world that felt unpredictable. So now that you can see where it came from, the next question is softer, but it matters. How do you recognize it in real time before it swallows your whole week? This isn't about learning a technique. It's about recognizing a familiar whisper in your system. You might notice it when your body goes quiet, but your mind gets loud. You start replaying conversations, rereading texts, scanning for what you missed. You feel a sudden urge to handle everything alone, especially when you're stressed, like asking for support would make things worse. Or you become unusually okay with something that actually hurt, not because you don't care, but because numbness feels safer than overload. Or after closeness, after a good date, a good conversation, a moment where someone really sees you, you suddenly want to pull back. Or you test people quietly, not on purpose, just to see if they stay consistent, because inconsistency used to mean something. And sometimes it shows up as irritation around kindness, not because you're ungrateful, because a part of you doesn't fully trust calm. Calm feels unfamiliar. In others, this can look like someone who's deeply considerate but hard to reach, someone who shows up for everyone but disappears when it's their turn to be held. This isn't about judging yourself. It's about seeing the pattern clearly enough that it stops feeling like a personal mystery. This isn't about fixing yourself overnight. It's not about dismantling your nervous system on a deadline. It's not about forcing yourself to just trust or be more positive. If you've carried too much for too long, the most meaningful beginning is often the quietest. It starts not with changing, but with witnessing. Maybe it looks like noticing the moment your body tenses when someone offers help, and instead of instantly saying, "I'm fine," you pause, just long enough to hear what your system is trying to do for you. Or noticing how quickly you minimize, "It's not a big deal," and gently wondering, is it not a big deal, or is this just the part of me that learned my needs were inconvenient? Or noticing you're running on empty, trying to stay strong for one more person, one more day, and letting yourself consider that stepping back isn't failure, it's information. You don't have to become someone new. You don't have to rewrite your whole nervous system on a deadline. You can start by building a relationship with the part of you that's been working so hard for so long to keep you safe.
Sometimes healing starts as a simple message to your own body. Thank you. I see why you do this, and I'm listening now. Because awareness changes things, not instantly, but steadily. When you stop treating your survival responses like defects, they soften. They don't have to scream to be heard. And that kind of understanding is already more than most people ever give themselves.
So, here's a question I want you to sit with. What's one thing you learned to carry alone as a child that you're still carrying now, even though you don't have to anymore? If you want, share the story behind it, not the whole thing, just the moment you remember learning, "I'll handle it myself." And if this video resonated, there's another pattern closely connected to it. People who didn't feel loved as children, and how that affects them long term. Because sometimes the weight you carry now started as a quiet question you had back then. Am I safe here? Do I matter here? That video is waiting for you next.